Hey guys, welcome back to the Guild.
Awesome. Great to be here again, Joe.
Absolutely. I know there's a lot of interest in Robot Framework, maybe some people that are new to Robot Framework. So really excited to really spread the gospel of Robot Framework. So thank you all for being here today.
Yeah, hi. Great to be here.
Awesome. Hey, Pekka.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Good to see you, Rohit. All right. So the Guild floor is all yours. So you want to kick it off, Mika?
Yeah, maybe very briefly. I'm Mika Solomon, I'm the Executive Director of the Robot Framework Foundation. And today we have a really good webinar coming up. So we have Pekka Clark here to talk about basics of Robot Framework and a little bit of showing how to ropes. And then we have Rohit showing a real life use case. So at least I'm excited. I also be talking a little bit on the end about getting most out of Robot Framework. But let's save it for that.
So hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Pekka. I'm the Robot Framework creator, and here I'm going to give you a quick introduction to Robot Framework before we get into this kind of more interesting stuff, the real life use case by Rohit. So we have, well, my session is like 20 minutes plus then a time for questions. So let's get started. The key thing to remember about Robot Framework, the one thing that I hope you at least remember from this session is that it's a generic automation framework. And there are two things related to that. First of all, being generic means that this framework is not tied to, for example, web automation or API automation or testing certain kind of UIs or something like that. It's fully generic. The core doesn't know anything about any kind of interfaces or anything like that, and then you extend the core with libraries. This is something that we'll get back to a bit later on. The other thing about this being generic automation framework is that there's no word test there. So Robot Framework has its origin in test automation, and it's still widely used in test automation, but it's also can be used for other kind of automation, like robotic process automation. And so you can also, in addition to creating tests, you can also create tasks that then can be used for automating business processes and so on. The framework is implemented using Python, and that's also the core language that you use to extend it with your custom libraries and other extensions. Python is nowadays a very popular language, as most of you most likely know. So it was a good kind of a pick for the framework when it was initially, the first versions of it were developed like 20 years ago or something like that. The framework origins go as well to 20 years back when I was writing my master's thesis and studied automation frameworks. I then did some prototypes that were kind of promising, and the initial development then happened at Nokia Networks in Finland, and it was later open source in 2008. And nowadays, the Robot Framework Foundation is sponsoring the development. So Nokia is one of the members still, but they are not directly involved anymore. And Mika is at the end going to speak about Foundation a bit more. The framework has a modular architecture. In this diagram, I just noticed that there's using test terminology like test data, test libraries, but it's the exact same thing even also if you would be using robot for other automation than testing. The core kind of box here is the bottom one, like system under test or system under automation. That's the one that you are developing, testing and so on. Then the framework is there kind of a middle. It parses data that we are going to see shortly, and then uses test libraries libraries to interact with the system under test or system under automation. And these libraries are the ones that make the framework so versatile. So that, although the core is totally generic, then you can adapt it into web automation or REST API automation or database automation or combination of all these with different kind of libraries. Libraries then often use ready-made test tools or other like automation tools, like, for example, in web automation, we have libraries both for using Selenium and for Playwright, and also for other kind of technologies, but Selenium and Playwright are the main two players there these days. The The syntax of the framework looks something like this. But instead of showing this, continuing with these slides, I'm actually going to show you exactly the same thing here as a demo, so that we can see how it works, how it looks like. Here I have the same example test as earlier, as on the slide, opened in VS Code, and we can see that we have a single test case here called valid login, and the robot framework is keyword-driven framework, so we create these tests, and the same way we would also create tasks if we are doing process automation from keywords. And this open browser to login page is a single keyword. It doesn't accept any parameters, whereas this type in username and type in password, they are also keywords, but they also accept parameters. So type in username is generic keyword that will type text demo into the application. Before actually going further, let's actually take a quick look at the application that we have here. So this is a really dummy application that we are going to automate here. So it looks like this. So it's just a login form basically where you have a username and password. And if I know that the valid credentials, I can get in, and that's the only thing I can do with this app. And then, of course, if I don't know the credentials, I don't get in. So this simple example here is a test case for this kind of happy path scenario so that we can log in with valid credentials. We could also then create test cases for different kind of error scenarios and so on, but we don't have time to go through all those. So yeah, here we have the test case. It has a workflow constructed from this kind of keywords, some of them taking parameters, and then there's a teardown setting at the end, making sure that the browser is closed regardless what happens, so that it's always cleared up. Before I run this, let's take a bit look what's below here. So we also hear this settings thing here that says a resource, and we are taking the use kind of a resource file named login. I can click here in the editor and get to the resource file, which has another settings section, which is taking the Selenium library you use. And as you can guess, Selenium library then is the library utilizing the Selenium tool underneath. It also has certain global variables that we can also change from the command line. For example, the browser to use and then the delay between actions. This is something we can increase if you want to make the execution a bit slower so that we can actually see what's happening. And then we have some keywords here created using the same syntax basically that was used there to creating the test case on the other file. These keywords like open browser to login page, this is totally domain-specific keyword. It's related to our application, this dummy one that I just showed you. And then it's utilizing other keywords. These also could be our domain-specific keywords, come from another resource file, but these actually come from the library. So open browsers at Selenium speed, title should be, go to all these. They are keywords from the Selenium library that we imported. And it then actually interacts with the system under test, which is the demo application. So let's see how it looks. We'll return back to this keywords a bit later, but let's at this point now see how all this, how we can run this. But actually, there's time for the questions at the end, but I cannot see the chat or anything like that. But if Joe or anyone, you have noticed questions and people already at this point, I can of course answer questions now as well.
Sure. Yeah, nothing's coming in yet, but if anyone has any questions, just let us know. You can drop it in the chat, but we recommend you put it into the Q&A poll section so we can show it on the screen. I'll let you know, Pekka, if anything comes through.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, we have more time than at the end, but if there's something that's like really relevant for the topic that I'm discussing, of course, we can go through it immediately.
Perfect.
So yeah, I could run this via the editor. The editor has the plugin for the VS Code editor it's very good. It has all kind of ways to run this test case directly here, but I'm actually going to run it on the command line. Start to use you to see how that works. So I have a terminal window here, and here with the robot command, I can give path to that file like this, and that will execute it. So that's a bad data file. Then the framework will parse it. It will see what keywords are used there, what libraries are imported, then we'll call those keywords and so on. So the browser comes up, and there it is. Getting the browser up took some time. Well, that's a Selenium issue mostly. Then it was so quick that we didn't really see what was happening. So let me run it again so that I increase the delay so that we actually see something. So I use a command line option called variable to override the delay variable that was set there in the data for the default value. I set it to 0.5 seconds between each action, so that should be enough. So now when the browser comes up, you can see that, okay, they open the login page, type in demo, types, well, password, we didn't see it, gets in, validates that we got in, and that's it. I could also equally easily replace the browser to use Chrome if I wanted to, but I guess this should be enough for the demo purposes. We can see that we got three output files. Well, the first one is in machine readable format XML. So this is something that external tools can then process. Robot Framework also support outputs nowadays in JSON format if you're interested in those. But these are anyway for the machines, so external programs. And then log and report are for humans. The report is, well, just basically very, very dummy now. It has a green background because everything went well. There was just single test case. It's not very interesting. But when you start to have more like dozens or hundreds or thousands test cases, then report with statistics and so on is much more interesting. But now what we are more interested in is the log file, where we can see that, okay, we had a test suite called valid. It was created from the valid robot file that we executed. It had a single test case called valid login. And then we can see each of these keywords that were executed. We can see that opening the browser really took some time, but otherwise it was relatively fast. Well, there was this delay even, so that's why this is what it took. Let's still see what happens if something goes wrong. So very easy way to make this test case fail is that I say, okay, well, that's not the valid password. So if I now run it again, I don't need the delay, I go fast. So it should fail. We should see that on a terminal. So we can see that, okay, title should have been a welcome page. It was error page, so we didn't get in. And now in the log file, we can see some red stuff here. We can see the first keywords, they succeeded, but then welcome page should be open, failed. Inside that keyword, title should be keyword failed. And then this is a feature of this particular library that took a screenshot so that, oh, this is where we actually were. So we can see that, well, yeah, clearly something went wrong, and then we can debug this further manually or otherwise. In the report also things look worse because now there's a failure, so the background is also red. Yeah, so I promised we'll return back to those keywords still. So these keywords that are used here are domain-specific keywords implemented in Robot Framework own syntax. But then in the resource file, we had these lower-level keywords from the library. And one of the kind of, if you look at the absolute key features of Robot Framework, the simple plaintext syntax is one. Log and report that are very comprehensive, show you what happened, are very important features as well. But then the ecosystem around the framework with various ready-made libraries like the Selenium library. Well, also this editor plugin that I'm using is part of the ecosystem. These are all great things as well. But another additional strength of the core framework is the simplicity of the library API. So it's easy to you to create your own custom libraries for custom needs or extend existing libraries that there are if you happen to know a bit of Python. So we can navigate from here. Also in this plugin, we can navigate to this title should be it's a library keyword. We can see actually documentation and arguments that Isaac did here as well. But we can click here and it goes to the library and we can see how the keyword has been implemented. So it's basically just a Python method. Title should be accepts two parameters, title and then optional message. And then there's some Python code here to get the title and validate it. Okay, if the title wasn't as what we expected, we'll raise an assertion error, and that's it. So it's really simple and straightforward to create your own custom libraries, so extend these and so on. So that's one of the core key features as well. Since we have a bit of time still,
Pekka, really quick, we do have a quick question. Someone wants to know what's the best IDE for Robot Framework? Is it Visual Studio or is it something else?
Well, the IDE to use, I guess that depends basically on your personal preferences. I'm using VS Code here. I personally use for my programming PyCharm more, simply because I prefer that IDE better than, well, it's for me better than VS Code. Somehow I've been using it, so my muscle memory knows it. The one thing that you really don't need to then compete much is which plugin to use. This robot code plugin that was initially developed for VS Code, but is nowadays available also for PyCharm. That is great. So I can say that it's up to you that which one of you do you prefer, VS Code or these IntelliJ platform plugins like PyCharm or IDEA or something like that. But then if you are using any of these, use robot code. Even if you would then use something else like Vim or stuff like that, this robot code is based on the language server protocol, which then allows you to use that also with other editors. So, but that there's no, as far as I know, there's no like ready-made bindings or something like other than this, like PyCharm and VS Code. So robot code editor is definitely the way to go. And then the IDE decision is more for your own personal kind of preferences.
Rohit, you're welcome to answer as well. I know you've worked with beginners. I don't know if there's one you find works best with people just learning or anything like that.
Basically, it's the same as what Pekka like said. It's more of a personal preference.
Okay.
While I started with PyCharm. Now I'm getting comfortable with VS Code with the Copilot feature as well available. So it's purely a personal preference. So anything with a proper plugin which can identify a robot framework keyword is something that we can go to.
Oh yeah, I actually still want to mention the old kind of robot framework editor called Ride, which is designed only for editing robot framework data. That can be a good option if people are really like non-technical, but it's only for robot framework data editing. It doesn't allow editing Python code, for example. So if there's any kind of other programming, then Ride doesn't work that well. But it's still viable option in cases where we have really like very non-technical people that need to do some kind of automation and so on. That's something you may want to check out as well.
Wouldn't you always want to use an IDE that uses like a Copilot though? Wouldn't that be like a huge benefit over Ride?
Well, I would assume that's also a factor nowadays. But I don't know if people are very non-technical, they may not get benefit from Copilot
that's
either.
True.
So.
Right.
So.
Awesome. Thank you. That's all we have so far.
Yeah, I think in general, I'm also pretty much done with the demo and the presentation. The one thing that I kind of wanted to quickly show was that we had that one test case there that was kind of a workflow going through this one scenario. If you want to go through the same scenario multiple times, like when dealing with like in this context, is invalid cases. Like we can have many different kind of test cases for invalid logging, like password being invalid or username being or both or something empty. So we can switch to so-called data-driven approach with Robot Framework as well. And these are now there's now 6 test cases for different kind of invalid logging scenarios that are all using this so-called template keyword, and which is implemented here. But well, I'm not getting into details. Then if I would start going in here, explaining this more thoroughly, then I would take too much Rohit's time. So I think we can skip it. But just to show that it's not when creating tests with robot, you don't always create them in this format. There's the data-driven format, and well, since I'm talking about different formats, there's also way to create test cases in this kind of a Gherkin style that the Cucumber tool uses. So if you are doing behavior-driven development, then this might be the way you want to construct your test cases instead of the one that I showed earlier. But these are context specific.
Sorry, there's actually a lot of beginners here. 32% said they've never used this before. Someone asked, do spaces matter, like Python?
That's a good question. So yeah, they do. So I could have gone through some of the syntax a bit more, but then again, this isn't exactly robot framework training, so it's kind of an intro. But yeah, very good question. So the separator between keywords and arguments and setting names and like their values is always spaces here. If there's 2 or more spaces, then it's considered a separator. We recommend 4 because then it makes the well, in some cases you may want to use more than 4, but minimum 4 is kind of good because then it's easier to see separate argument from the keyword, for example, here. Of course, the highlighting done by the editor helps as well. But yeah, so single space here is just part of the name, but when there's more than those spaces, then it actually matters.
Very
cool.
Good.
But yeah, I think I will stop sharing now, and we can get into questions. So well, I can of course keep this open as well. If that doesn't really matter if there's question related to this demo. I'm now open for any kind of question related to robot framework. So
another question was: is there an interactive interpreter for robot framework similar to Python?
There's, for example, something called debug library. I think it's part of a library, part of an interpreter. So I don't know how much is developed right now, but that's something that has been developed at some point by someone in the community. Then Rene from our foundation board, actually the chairman, was interested in developing it further at some point. I don't know, has he been working with it lately? But yeah, there's something like that available. It's not in the core. Not sure, should there be something in the core? Maybe. But yeah, there are possibilities like that. I cannot now show you an example because I don't have anything set up.
Right.
But interactive stuff, the one cool thing with the editor, of course, is this completion. So if I start typing something, I can just type a beginning and then okay, so it'll do that. And now when it doesn't have the required parameter, it's complaining about parameter being missing and so on. So that's of course not the same thing as an interpreter, but the editor is very, very, very powerful in this case that it can autocomplete. And then of course with AI additions and so on, you can then even generate a lot of this stuff.
Excellent. We have another question from Rajesh. Wants to know: are there any common mistakes or misconceptions you see teams make when first adopting robot framework? How can they avoid them?
One quite common issue I've seen is that people do way too complicated things in robot framework syntax when they could very easily move the logic to Python. Of course, if people are not technical and they don't consider them programmers, and they consider Python somehow very complicated and it's a real programming language, they don't want to touch it. But then what they sometimes end up doing is much more complicated programming constructs in robot framework side, which would probably be then simpler on Python side and then also more powerful, more would have better performance. Then again, we have introduced programming constructs to robot framework as well. So nowadays it has like native ifs, else structures and for loops and whiles and so on. They are not that often needed in test automation. There are, of course, use case for them as well, but in other kind of automation, you more often need to do some. If you're automating some kind of business process, you more often need to have conditional logic. That if I have this system available, let's do that, and if I don't, then do something else. Yeah, so that's one problem. In general, I guess one challenge in taking robot framework for you to use in the beginning is that it's so versatile and it's been designed to be very flexible. So you can use it in very, very different kind of context, which is great in many different ways, but it also makes it impossible for us to say that, okay, this is the way that you should always use it, because there's no single way that people should use it in different contexts. And then it's kind of may take some time for you to understand if you new to it, what's the best way that what works in this particular context for you, and so on. But it's not hard to learn, and so you can just get started, do something, and then I guess when getting started, I guess the key thing is that you evaluate what you've done at some point, so that if you need to redo part of your kind of overall automation architecture, the sooner you do that, the better, because after years and a lot of test cases and a lot of other infrastructure making bigger changes, of course, it's more painful.
One more thing to add from my side, which I see as a common mistake that beginners do start with is initially they do a lot of folder structuring before they actually begin with the development. So that's good when you have already like 2-3 projects into it, you know how automation works, the frameworks and stuff. But when you start in the beginning, start with simple use cases, simple folder structure. As and when you mature, then move on to a more proper, like an enterprise level folder structure or an architecture is what I would suggest for those who are like starting new.
Great advice.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It's hard to, if you try to do a big upfront architecture planning before it may, especially if you're new to the thing, then that can be very challenging. So most likely better do something simple and then think about what worked well and what didn't and so on.
All right. We also have a question from Seema. She wants to know, she's a little confused. Why would I use this over something like Selenium or Playwright?
Oh, sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, they wanted to know, why should I use a robot framework over something like Selenium or Playwright? What's the difference?
Well, part of the question is the one that I said in the beginning, that is generic automation framework. So, for example, if you're doing embedded testing, then you don't do much with Selenium or Playwright. But then Robot Framework could be a good fit. You most likely then need to implement a custom library for you. But anyway, so if you're doing only web testing, then using Python with Playwright or Python Selenium or any other language that these tools support, like, well, if you're doing like only web stuff, then you most likely are using TypeScript, like, and then TypeScript with Playwright is most likely a very good solution for you. So in those cases, they might be better. I mean, the robot framework is absolutely not a silver bullet for all kind of automation or test automation needs. It depends on the context. So I would say that developers doing web development and then creating test cases, then if it's only those developers doing it, then benefits with robot are quite small. But even in like web only project, there might be benefits in having test cases as more like examples in plain text format that are then easier to grasp for business stakeholders and other like non-technical people as well and help there. So it kind of depends on what the team dynamics. If it's only developers, then they don't get that much from robot. But then if it's less technical testers, managers, so the benefits are bigger. Also in project where you have like web automation, web front end, but then you also want to validate something from a database or maybe do an API call and then have something else there. Robot Framework can be a good kind of a high level tool to combine lower level tools together. So you can do this kind of end-to-end test that involve mobile and normal browsers and whatnot. But yeah, it's definitely not always the right choice.
Awesome. It's refreshing to hear. Sometimes the creator of a tool says it works for everything. It is a silver bullet. So thank you for that, Pekka. Rahit, were you going to say something?
No, I have a bit of a comment on that as well, but I will take it at the end of my session because it's not only a developer-oriented team; it's going to be a mixture of teams. So it'll be more relevant if I take it at the end. So, yep. So today I'll be talking about Robot Framework and a story of scalable business adaptation. My name is Rohit Ram Prabhakaran. I work as a test automation architect and Tata Consultancy Services. Although Pekka did give a very brief introduction, a quick introduction from my side as well, which is more relevant to the topic that I'm talking about. Robot Framework does support an easy scripting language. It is basically like most of the coding that we do is in English, and it does support other languages as well. The syntax, as you saw in the demo, is a very easy one to adopt. So it doesn't require a great coding expertise to get started off. Here, I would like to also answer the question that came up earlier. why can't we have a developer or like someone use a plain Selenium or a playwright script, right? So the advantage here is that people who are non-technical can also use robot framework or adopt robot framework in easy fashion. And we already have a lot of readily available libraries rather than going for a vanilla, like say Python with Selenium, or let's say Rest Assured, where you need to do your own scripting to come up with these specific activities. Robot Framework gives you already set of a lot of readily available libraries. The familiar ones are like Selenium for UI or browser-based automation, and request libraries for API level automation, and so on. Again, it's very easy to understand the logic behind these keywords and apply for a business use case. So not only technical users, even non-technical users can easily adopt this framework. Today, we'll be seeing one common challenge that I come across with many of our clients is that functional testing or testers or domain experts do not know automation. So, or they do only the functional part of the testing, wherein the automation people do the automation part of it. On the other hand, automation people do not learn or focus much on the functional or gaining the domain knowledge experience. Holistically, from a testing point of view, this gives a lot of impact. One is soil teams with different knowledge gaps. As you see, functional testing might only focus on functionality, and automation might focus on the regression testing and the happy pathway. A soil team with different knowledge gap team is doing, automation tries to do it parallelly or at a later stage, like an N-1 or N-2 sprint. The next one is an important thing, which leads to a poor test coverage. Because of functional team focusing fully on, let's say, business use cases, edge cases, and so on, and test automation team focusing on mostly the happy path and regression test cases, the coverage is not totally aligned between both of them, or sometimes misaligned between the teams. And because of this, there's also the tools and process fragmentation that happens between these two teams, which can lead to higher maintenance and cost. Overall, the release cycles will be very slow in this case. And we have seen wherein the test automation lags a lot in many cases when it compares to the in-sprint functional testing. Overall, we kind of lack a unified quality mindset when it comes to these two teams operating in silos. I'll be speaking about one such case and the solution for it. The ideal solution is to have a bridge between these two skill sets for the effective functioning of testing operation. There are two approaches. One is to make the automation testers and train them in functional domain and have them a domain knowledge. Let's say I was working in a credit risk domain for a few months to years. And to understand the domain, it almost took me a couple of years or more than a couple of years to get into the basics and understand what's happening, being part of the automation world. So that being said, there's also another way where we can enable the domain users or the business users to learn a bit of automation. And that's where Robot Framework kind of helped us. So we followed the second way, wherein we took a journey and we kind of scaled up the business or domain expert people into test automation space and increased their presence in the automation space and kind of elevated the automation impact as well. See, the journey was a long-term process. It was not a 1 or 2 month process, right? From planning to execution, it took almost 9 months. But over the time, it provided, or starting from each of the months, it provided subsequent results. And I do not describe the whole journey as such, but it will be a bit of a mock description for the purpose of the talk and easy understanding of the audience. The journey started with analyzing the current state. Then we formed a vision and the strategy over how to proceed, implemented the same, and how the teams adopted and brought up to the change management in the next process. Finally, I will talk about the achievements, the future roadmap, and key takeaways from this. Just a quick check. Hope you can see my first stage one current slide.
Yes.
Current state.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks, Joe. So, yeah, the current state is that the program had 100 plus team members, and it had 9 to 10 different teams, each of the teams having scaled agile methodology, following scale agile methodology, and teams consist of 10 to 15 people, including developers and other stakeholders. Teams had a good functional test cases that were around close to 20,000 in number. And over past few years, or let's say around 1-2 years, only 20% of the regression test cases were automated. There was a huge demand for regression automation because subsequently each release is happening, and every time we have to do a risk-based or a subset-based small amount of functional testing to prove regression quality. So regression testing demand were high in place. Also, when progression testing, many a times it was a bit slow and prone to manual error. We tend to kind of miss bugs at many places and so on. So there was a huge demand for progression testing as well. With respect to the automation exposure, 10% of the program did have a good amount of people who had a good automation exposure. 20% of the associates did have a basic exposure of how automation works. And the critical part is the client said going to be no downtime in this training or adaptation phase. That means deliverables goes as such with their own pace. We have to inject this whole process somewhere so that we don't see a lag in the deliverables, as much see the impact of positive impact of automation. Next is the vision and strategy. So the first vision is to turn SDLC process into a trust-driven and on automation first approach. And the next one is to train the functional experts to have automation exposure. We decided to categorize people based on their expertise. So we had learning level 1 or beginner level people, learning level 2 or intermediate people, learning level 3 or the expert level people. And the first strategy is to clear the backlog, that is the regression first. So for every release of the cycles, regression pack gets executed and we already see the positive impact of automation. Next is to move on to the progression test cases automation or in sprint automation. The implementation was something that we followed a streamlined approach. We couldn't force anyone to do this. So we kind of reached out to people and asked if they wanted to learn. We gave them an introduction of automation, how easy it is to adopt robot framework. Also at the same time, we said how it will benefit the program if they kind of adopt this automation. So that being said, we took a survey, and for those who are interested, we had to train them in test automation space. To our surprise, 90% of the domain and business testers, including the UAT experts, were interested in learning test automation. And that's where Robot Framework really helped us. They don't need something, or they were not really interested in going to a vanilla flavored automation where they need to script from the beginning. Let's say they don't need to do a driver dot get element or something, which might complicate their learning ability or their ways of working. They want something that's very linear. Let's say open a browser, do this operation, perform this assertion, check if the test case passed. That's how simple they express their interest to do learn automation. And Robot Framework seems to be a correct fit in this case. If carefully formulated curriculum for each of the learning levels, and I've just given a sample curriculum for one of the learning level, which is more like a beginner level info. So it started with a week 1, wherein we give introduction to test automation. We tell them what is the advantage of automation, how to select the appropriate automation candidate, and so on. Week 2 gives an introduction to Robot Framework and how it is useful, the simple syntaxes, the libraries that are available, and so on. Week 3 gives a deep dive into all the different syntaxes, including the loopings and so on with Robot Framework, and how we can handle different libraries, or the basic ones, like built-in collections and so on. We also try to explain what are the different sections in Robot Framework and how it can be customized. For example, how we can use setup and tear down in our settings section, how we can create our custom libraries, how we can create different variables and so on. Week 4 deals with how we can create different styles, like how Pekka explained BDD framework, data-driven framework, and a keyword-driven framework, or a hybrid framework which combines one or two of the above approaches. How can we attain this with Robot Framework? Was the goal of week 4, along with different variable operations. Week 5 deep dived into keyword level usage, how to use keywords, existing ones, and how to rebuild our own custom keywords, or from the existing keywords, how to stack the existing ones and build a new custom keyword, or how to build a custom keyword right from writing your Python script and so on. We also talked about how to parameterize the keywords so that we can have a scalable keyword approach. So that one keyword is not only used once, but it can be used to multiple operations. With the given parameters, it can even be scaled to multiple areas. The next step we did is to form a techno-functional group of testers. And each group will have their own teams channels. They will interact. They will share their learning progress. They'll discuss their doubts, and they'll reach out to expert people and so on. So it will be a team of 10 members, let's assume. So it contains 2 expert level members, 3 intermediate level members, and 5 of them will be business and UAT testers. The major steps will be predominantly automated by technical experts or level 3 expert level people. And each step, we wanted to use it as a robot framework keyword. So it can be easily reused by the functional or domain experts when they call the keywords and use it in their test case. And based on how the people learn and scale up, different kinds of automation tasks were assigned to them. I'll shortly jump into the development approach of how we kept the framework very scalable. As I told, the team is going to be a mixture of or a predominantly lesser number of automation folks and more number of business users. So we wanted to keep the folder structure very straightforward and linear. You see, we have our libraries, and this is an application that verifies customer details in a retail ecosystem, like verifying the quality of a customer details, like a data mart or a transformations, and then giving the quality check results and so on. So the application validates different categories of quality checks that the retail industry stores and do analytics on top of it. These quality checks are categorized on different categories, like category 1, 2, and so on. And that is kept under the libraries. I'll shortly describe about each of these files as well. Then we have a resource under resource section. And the tests will be divided into each technical layer. For example, we have sourcing layer as sourcing UAT, data mart as the target layer or the data mart layer as data mart UAT, and so on. And inside sourcing layer, what you see is a simple sample which will be scaled or repeated in the same format for the other sources as well. So it starts with a single robot file called source1 robot file. And then it will also have corresponding source1 robot folder, which will have their null checks, duplicate checks, and other checks in YAML format. That's more like a test data file. So it will be a data-driven approach. Now we'll jump on to how we develop this. The Python function, pretty much what you see is that verifies or provides you the query for null check. I haven't provided the query. The query goes in line 12 and 18. It will be a long query that is customized for different use cases. But let's assume simple null check query goes in here. And these kind of implementation are mostly done by expert and intermediate level people who are good with the Python implementation and also with the robot framework syntax. Next, followed by the usage of these libraries. So when we create the methods in Python, those can be directly called as keywords in the robot framework ecosystem. So what you see as a definition in line number 9 will be called in line number 7 in the next file, in the keywords file that I show here. So in this way, we were able to scale up the automation by only the expert backlog or expert developers backlog lies with only creating most of the reusable keywords and make it more scalable. The next part is what does the task that beginners or the UAT users do. Let's consider this robot file. It has a very linear or straightforward structure. Importing goes first from different resources and set up tier down as usual. We have it in any project. We used to set up connections since it's database and disconnect connections. Variables is simple as such. We have given the folder where we have the test files in. So, and when we come to the test cases, it will give a very straightforward test case saying that verify a null check or a verify a duplicate check. And it will call whatever keyword is necessary with the given arguments. You see the structure for robot source1.robot. The same test cases will be followed by source2.robot. And the only thing is that your directory files and the test data files will change here. When I talk about test data files, we chose the YAML format to have the test data files. So here it represents a simple collection. So wherein the key of your dictionary is your table name, and the column names is a list that is provided as a value. or in simple words, business users can give a format like this, wherein something that comes before the colon goes in as a table name, and the column names are represented with a hyphen below it. We told them the logic behind it, and they were easily able to adopt this and create test data files as well. So in this way, we were able to provide a scalable approach for the business users. So if they are familiar with one or two times, they can simply start building their robot test cases, and they start using the test data files as such. Some beginners even scaled up to a point where they started writing their own keywords in a week's time or a few weeks' times. Now, let's jump on to the adaptation. The main challenge that we faced in the adaptation is our day-to-day deliverables. As we said, we didn't take a pause during this learning curve. So we had to manage that as well as try to learn this. This kind of disrupted a bit of ways of working. And especially we got a bit of discontent from Scrum Masters and product owners that we are affecting the pace of operation. Later, a bit of technical training and technical training as in to say what are the uses of it, long-term impacts of automation, and those things were given to the product owners and Scrum Masters. And they kind of realized the positive impact of automation. And as we proceeded, it required a cooperation of all the stakeholders, and then the process kind of eased out. Now, this process was not standard across all the teams. So we have to do a bit of a customized approach for some of the teams to cater this approach and follow them. So a bit of customization were also there. So what did we achieve? So let's say over a past of 2 years, the automation ratio was only 20%. But within 2 quarters, we changed the plate and we brought in almost 60% of the regression tags were automated. There were more bugs found out in the regression pack when we run it for the releases, and hence the impact was wide around and it was spoken across the whole program as such. A few teams did complete their 100% regression automation and went on to sprint level automation as well. Overall, the SDLC cycle reduced and there was better customer satisfaction as well. A quick intro into the future roadmap. As we see, there is always a future thing to go on with technology. So we will have 100% test cases automated in the regression pack that will run every release. And we'll have a progression test followed for each of the releases as well. That means we'll kind of slip away from the manual test approach, and rather than to call it, we'll call it the manual way of execution to an automated way of execution, wherein the business users will also try to execute as to what they want. And also, we will include the regression pack in the CI/CD pipeline so that after the release deployment, automatically these checks gets triggered and executes and gives a quality result of the corresponding releases. Overall, I'd like to conclude with saying that Robot Framework is an easy to adopt low-code framework, and business users can easily adopt. Not only technical people, business people can easily adopt it. And I've seen projects which started with a huge investment of high number of technical developers, but during the course of time, they want to reduce in size and they wanted to have business users in place. So in this case, this proves to be a very good framework fit. And with the given mode of scalable solution that we have, it will through an easy way for the business users to use this. And although what we talked or the implementation timeline was 6 months of implementation, you have to do the pre-planning of this execution, and it took a lot of effort. Almost 3 to 4 people worked for 3 months along with the day-to-day activities to curate the curriculum, the ways of operation, to customize it for different teams and so on. So it requires a careful planning and customization of the framework. And a major shift is also required from each of the stakeholders, not only from the testers and business users who test the application, but also from a developer perspective, from product owners to even the top management. They should understand or cooperate with these ways of working so that they see the fruits of the test automation done, the impact in the future releases or cycles. Overall, rather than seeing two different ways of approach of testing, as in domain-wise testing and automation-wise testing, if they kind of coexist, it brings a real good value and gives a better business purpose as well. And hence, a lot of quality products can be brought in this way. I would like to thank Robot Framework Foundation for giving me this opportunity. And in case if you want to connect with me in LinkedIn, you can send this QR code. Yep. And this is with my talk, and I'm open for questions.
Excellent. So just a heads up, we're at the top of the hour, but I believe ahead of time we said we could take a few questions past the hour. Is that okay still with everyone? Excellent. First question is, when creating tests for complex complex suites, tests have many steps and many windows to deal with. Is the keyword layer of Robot Framework sufficient, or should I switch to Python code instead for better organization of code reusability?
Yep. So it would, if you have technical people who can do the task, yes, we can do it in the Python layer. That can be useful. But if the proportionality is a bit lesser and you have more technical or functional users in this case, it can be attained with Robot Framework. But to switch on to Python, provided you have the corresponding resources, it's always a better way.
Excellent. Pecker, anything you want to add, or next one?
No, I totally agree. I think most of the time, working with standard libraries, so the libraries provided by the community in the ecosystem, that's of course easy way to get started. But if your app is very complicated and has a lot of state, and you need to handle special cases, pop up, so on, then implementing your own library might be a better long-term solution. Of course, it's bigger initial investment, but then most likely your test cases are going to be simpler, because then you can use often direct library keywords in your test cases, and so on. So that then you need less robot framework code in that sense. But yeah, it depends highly, of course, on a context. The step from using ready-made libraries that others are maintaining and providing new enhancement to it, to taking it all to yourself, of course, is quite a big one. So the benefits need to be big if you do that, but they can definitely be big enough.
Cool. Next question: how does Robot Framework interpret the decorator's backend in Python?
I actually don't know. The decorator in Python is a concept, but I don't know what it means actually at this context. In some of my examples, there were keyword decorator used. In those cases, with that particular library, the Selenium library, those are actually mandatory, because that doesn't even use the most simple possible library API internally. But in simple cases, when creating simple keywords for Robot Framework, they are just Python methods, or functions even in a module, and they don't need to be specifically decorated with anything. Then those decorators have their benefits in a bit more complicated cases, but in really simple cases, you don't need them. This is actually a topic Mika is going to talk about. We already talked a bit about the RoboCon, and at the RoboCon workshops, there's their workshops as well, and I typically do a kind of a deep dive workshop. We're going through into different kind of APIs where we cover also these decorators related to libraries and so on. And there's also going to be a separate workshop session, quite short. I think Mika is going to mention that as well, where I also have another session that is going to be getting into this kind of details about the library API and other kind of APIs. Definitely not the beginner session that, but can be interesting if you already know the basics of the library API.
Cool. All right. One question from you, Rohi, is they want to know, how did you scale adoption? Because it seemed like you were able to scale it out. Was there one key thing? Because a lot of people struggle with getting people to actually adopt any framework, and it seemed like you got hundreds of people to actually implement Robot Framework. Was there one key driver for you that you saw really worked?
The main thing is the enthusiasm of the people, which was not expected in the initial stage. But as they learned something new, the way we encouraged them and we allocated corresponding tasks to them, right? So if someone can write a good amount of test cases, then we encourage them to go to the keyword level. And someone who can do it at the keyword level, we encourage them to go to the next level. So the learning curriculum did help them to go to the next stages and correspondingly explore it. And at the same time, when we assumed ourselves as a learner as well when we curated the curriculum. So what would benefit us the most for the given program or the writing test cases for the given application was something that we always ran through our head before telling people how to do it. So that's one key thing. Yeah.
Great. And sorry, Rohit, someone actually just dropped something in the chat as well. As a beginner question to Rohit, how can I learn the integration of function tests and automation tests?
The basic idea, I mean, at least how I started decade back was mostly I tried to write the pseudocode. That's how my architects like kind of trained me up, and then I tried to uh, replicate with the automation scripts. So the same thing is what I would recommend. And back in then, I was not aware of robot framework, unfortunately. But you do have a robot framework. Let's say a set of steps to automate a browser, a login, like as Pekka told. The initial step to do is write a pseudocode out of it. And here, your pseudocode can as much be as your keyword definition. So then you take it forward, implement it, and take it forward. And the main thing is to understand the existing custom libraries that is built. There's a huge set of libraries. For example, we took a API level automation and kind of introduced to a few teams in this operation. And they pretty much all the libraries were available in the request library section. So all the keywords were available. We didn't like even need a custom keyword in that aspect. So that's how beautiful it can start with the learning journey and how we can progress with robot.
Nice. Awesome. I think that's all the time we have a question. So I go around the room and final words of wisdom. Mika, will end with you. We'll start with Pekka. Any final words of wisdom you want to leave the crowd here?
I could say a few words, but if Rohit, Pekka, you still have something, go ahead.
No, thanks for everybody for joining. And if you're new to Robot Framework, I hope you got intrigued to learn more. We have a good learning resources. If don't mention it already earlier, robotframework.org is the homepage of the whole ecosystem. There you can find more information about the core framework, about all the external libraries, and so on. And, so there are guides you can find via there. And yeah, we have a lot of upcoming events, which I think Mika will mention when he gets to say his parting words.
Yeah. I just want to thank Rohit and Pekka for being here, and Joe, of course, for hosting. And of course, all the audience there live or then later in recording. And about those events coming up, basically, there is a whole set of learning coming up. So, of course, we'll do another set of webinar with Joe coming up next week. There will be some hands-on workshop online 1st of October. As Pekka mentioned before, he will be also there. But the main event, of course, is RoboCon, where we hope to see many of you, whether online or in person in Helsinki. And best source of information for everything is robotframework.org, where you can always join our Slack and forum as well, which is super friendly, and encouraged to join those. And regarding the conference, robocon.io. So see you there, and thanks for joining.